Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory Johnston. My pronouns are he and him.
My name is David Richards. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And another action-packed week.
Yeah.
It's been a week, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, we don't seem to run out of things.
No. As like I said last week, I was worried about that when we first started talking about this podcast, and man, oh man, it's it's not like there's filler. It's pretty it's pretty consistently more to talk about than we have time to talk. That's partly because I talk too much, but so we should probably jump right in on stuff here.
Sure.
One of those stories that I guess like for me hits close to home, and I'm not sure if it does for you as well. But the temporary remote learning announced within the public schools in Regina again. It's interesting timing because the kids were going to be off school for 2 weeks anyways. So now it goes from 2 weeks to a month, a week of remote at the beginning, a week of remote at the end.
Which is an interesting dynamic. My son, I don't know if they are doing this in the younger grades, but at the high school level, they were already only going every second day.
Okay.
So he was already only going every second day. So this last week, before the remote learning started, he was only going to school 2 days. Anyway. Okay.
And for my kids, the elementary age, they were going every day.
Okay.
So this will be a bigger change for them. We actually pulled them out a few days early. There had been an actual COVID scare at their school. We got a call on, I believe it was, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. We got a call. This has been a really, really hectic week for me for some other reasons as well. But we had a call early in the week from the school saying, there was a kid on the same bus that your kids take that had COVID. So you're going to need to have them in isolation for a week, and you pick them from school and all that. And we were like, well, our kids didn't take the bus. We for this very reason, we've been making we've been taking steps to make sure we've been driving them every day, and they're not even the buses doesn't even stop to pick them up anymore. We called to make sure that no one was wasting their time. But so we didn't have them on the bus that they would have taken had they been taking the bus. There was a kid who had tested positive for COVID. So they said, okay, well, if he doesn't take the bus, you don't actually have to take him out of school. And it was I remember it was Wednesday partway through the day, and we're like, you know what? We could Thursday, Friday, they'll be home.
Might as well.
We're not going to pick them up partway through the day because I think at that point, whatever they're exposed to at noon, there's not going to be any different from 3:00.
Right.
So, we picked them up that day after school as per usual. We messaged the teacher, said, hey, I know they're going to be picking stuff up on Friday, but can you send it home early today? And all that. And we still went and grabbed some stuff on Friday like they did because we haven't been physically allowed in the school since September, right? Only the kids are. So their mom drove them to the school Friday afternoon. They went in, they dropped off Christmas presents for their teachers, and they picked up stuff. They had no contact with any person. It was one of those things where they walk in, they drop stuff off, they pick stuff up. They didn't actually see their teachers. So it's weird for them.
No kidding.
I was one who picked them up after school on the Wednesday, and we were talking about it, and it was weird because my older son, we gave both of them the choice in September whether they would do e-learning or learn from home. They're 10 and 12. They're old enough to make those decisions for themselves, and my older one was pretty adamant. He has ADHD and other, has accommodations to work in school properly. But
Right.
he said right off the hop, like, home is too distracting for me. I need, like, if I can be at school safely, he sort of gave us three main concerns. It was the bus, recess, and lunchtime were sort of his big things. So we went through, or gym time was the other one. We went through sort of like, here are what is going to be done. Wheel drive you so you don't have to take the bus. He eats a big breakfast, and he has a snack when he gets home from school. So he doesn't actually eat during lunchtime other than a juice box that he can have while he still has his mask on. And we started making him bring a granola bar just because it's too long to go 6 hours without.
Kidding.
But he was really concerned about transmission during lunch because at 12, you're starting to think about these things. And the school takes steps during gym. So my youngest son sort of decided to go physically to school and sort of changed his mind a weekend. And it was like, now that it's a weekend, like the school sort of talked about how you're allowed to change. Essentially, you're allowed to change your mind once. Like if you decide to do e-learning and then partway through decide to go to school again, you're fine. Or if you decide to do school learning partway through to e-learning, you're fine. But you can't do the back and forth. And I 100% understand why they would put that in place. So we kind of had that at that point. If you're in person for a week and then you're switching, and it wasn't switching because of safety concerns for him. He was really, really excited about a specific teacher he had. And because of class sizes changing, a week or two in, he moved to a different class. Nothing wrong with the new teacher. He was really angry that he lost his old teacher because of e-learning, essentially. But now he's upset even too. He's like, no, I love my new teacher too. So they're both really upset about the e-learning, and they understand why. But man, it's tough on them. And again, safety's first. I think the school board is doing a heck of a job balancing everything. I think you and I have talked right from the beginning of this podcast about how it's unfortunate that so much of this has to be done at the board level rather than having provincial direction.
Yeah, a little bit of leadership from the provincial government would have been nice, but they are doing a phenomenal job. When they felt that it was too risky, they switched high schools to every other day. And when every time there's been a case in a school, they've shut down that classroom or they've shut down the school for a number of days, to make sure that things are safe for everybody. I think they've done a phenomenal job. Given the circumstances.
There's some data here on it too. It's 63 students and 26 staff have tested positive so far this year. 39 out of 57 schools have been affected. So 2/3 of schools are affected in some way. We've had 8 elementary schools closed. We've had a high school closed. The total number of absence days so far this year is 8,422 days worth of absenteeism, which is 24% higher than normal. More than 1,100 employee absent days due to quarantine. It's such a tough environment, and hats off to every single teacher who's working through this. Both the ones who are doing the e-learning classrooms as well as the ones in school. So
I was reading a Twitter thread earlier today, and they were referencing some studies that have been coming out recently, talking about how, despite the fact that a lot of people think that students and schools is not where transmission of COVID happens because they don't have symptoms. They're maybe not coughing as much or what have you. But it's turning out that a lot of places are showing, even if they're locked down other places and they're still going to school, they're finding out that school is still where transmission happens, even though younger people are not showing any symptoms and don't experiencing it the same way. So it's like, I was talking to a conservative person, and they said, well, everybody's starting to get on board with the idea that that schools are not where transmission happens. And that was a few days ago. But then today I'm reading this thread from doctors and scientists and experts who are studying it. And it's like, okay, actually, Here's the facts.
Well, and it's one of those things where, every virus is different, and we're learning about this. It's not like it's not like we had the data and someone just didn't pay attention to it. We're gaining the data as we go. And it was interesting. I saw a meme, and it took me a second to connect what it was talking about. But one of the things that has been talked about time and time again when it comes to AIDS is undetectable equals untransmittable. If your viral load reaches a point where your testing is undetectable, at that point, the virus is no longer transmittable.
Right.
And that is an important message as part of the destigmatization of the virus. And understanding that. But I looked at it, and again, it's one of those ones where, in the context of COVID, I
slightly different.
I fear that people don't understand what undetectable means in that context, because undetectable in that context means undetectable to tests, not undetectable as in if you look at someone and can't tell, right? And I think that's the thing with kids is it's undetectable from the standpoint of, they're not sneezing or coughing.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the virus isn't there. And it wouldn't be detectable if you actually did testing. And I think that's where we need to be a little bit careful on some of the messaging and looking at things there. So, but adults get sloppy, right? It's one of those, so if adults get sloppy, we know kids are going to. Right. And it's okay. Well, recess is supposed to be socially distanced and they're still going to go play King of the Hill. Right? I remember when I was 12, we were told we weren't allowed to play King of the Hill because, kids were getting concussions as they fell down the hill. So we weren't allowed to do it then because it was dangerous, but did it anyways because we were 12 and invincible. I think we'd be naive to think that won't still happen, that there isn't going to be some element of transmission. The classrooms are fine, but I think I have the sneaking suspicion things like behaviors during before and after school time outside, because recess was moved to before school and after school, but it's still sort of a joint activity time, joint recess. So there's going to be cross contamination there, and I think we know that there is because we're seeing evidence of it. So we'll see what happens January 11th. That's when in-person learning is supposed to start back up. Remote learning is supposed to start back up again January 4th after the holidays. In person, the 11th. We'll see if it does. We'll see where things are from a vaccination standpoint, because that's a month from now. Who knows what'll have changed by then as far as.
Yeah. I mean, there's a significant light at the end of the tunnel here. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to pretend that vaccination equals getting everything back to exactly normal. No. But there's a light there that we can see.
Well, and I think how bright that light is going to depend on how many people vaccinate.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I heard multiple people saying over from news accounts last week that if you don't have at least a significant portion, like 80% or more, then you may as well not be vaccinating because you're going to still have the same essential transmission rates on some level. Yeah.
I think it's still worth it I don't think that's quite.
As an individual, I think that societally, as an individual, it's still worth it. But
I remember early on, this was like April, May type time frame. I remember reading that the threshold they want is 70%. It's 70% is sort of that magic number. If you got 70% of the population vaccinating, you're going to be able to shut this thing down.
Quote unquote herd immunity.
Remember how herd immunity went from a term that we use to talk about how if enough people vaccinate, we create herd immunity through the vaccinations, and then somehow the anti-vax movement co-opted the term to mean just let everyone get sick and those of us who don't die are fine.
Yeah,
that's not what that term. All right, that's okay.
That's not what we meant. Jesus, what the hell?
So it'll be interesting. What's interesting as well is this time, like it's going to be the actual in-classroom teachers that are going to be doing those 2 weeks of e-learning rather than the kids joining the e-school for a week, which is, again, probably better. But, you now have 2 different versions of e-learning for 2 different cohorts of kids.
Right, yeah.
I think, again, for elementary school kids, I think, like, I'm lucky because my kids are younger. I'm curious to see how this impacts high school students, because you are dealing with credits and grades and marks and affecting scholarships and entrance and all of that.
I don't know how universities are going to treat this at all. No. I know, like, my son at the start of the year insisted that he needed to be in a classroom because he just didn't do well trying to do e-learning or learning at home. And even still, like, the way that the school year hasn't been structured the same way that he's been used to has affected his ability to do school. Yeah. And then partway, like, through the semester or the last couple months, they started going at his school to every second day as a precautionary measure, which is great in safety wise, but it's really hard on their learning.
Right.
It's hard for them to get into a routine.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
Not every program involves writing an essay or applications and stuff, but for the ones that do, I have to imagine you're going to have a lot of entrance essays that talk about overcoming the hardships through COVID, and everyone has a lot of these stories now of resiliency and part of me thinks, for high school, like, not that this is a good thing in any way, but it more accurately reflects the university environment. For those who do go to university, like in university, you're sort of, the expectation is, kind of 2 hours of work for every 1 hour in class. So only about a third of your learning time is in class. So 2/3 is out of class. And
so, maybe it's good habit building.
Yeah. So having to learn, I wish I had figured that out, because I was someone who sort of breezed through my last couple of years of high school. And then I got hit hard when I got to university and didn't have the structure, or was allowed to ignore the structure.
Right.
So, maybe it's a way of kids learning, and again, trying to figure stuff out. For the younger kids, like, kids learn. Like, that's one of those things where a 10 and a 12-year-old, no matter what, like, you can't stop a 10 and a 12-year-old from learning. They are going to learn no matter what. It's just a matter of what are they learning, right? Like, it's where are you putting them and what are they learning about? So, it's important that they not miss out on certain key things that they're going to need to know.
Right.
Especially some of the more technical things. I'm lucky my kids are both fairly good at math, but like math would be one of those ones where, for anyone who has kids who are missing time, the math is kind of the one that you need to keep up on, because if you come back a year later, there's sort of a lot of foundational stuff that will get built on later. Whereas a lot of the softer stuff, like, it's not that it's less important, but it's less layered, at least not as rigidly. If you read, I'm trying to think of books that they read in elementary school, and they're all in French, so they slip my memory when it's my own kids. But if you read a book in grade 4 and a different book in grade 5 and a different book in grade 6, the order in which you read those probably isn't going to matter all that much. It's the depth at which it's analyzed, and there's an expectation that you're getting more and more in depth. But the specifics of that can be framed a lot differently. So, and this entire experience is like social studies immersion, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's right.
the ability to live through a global crisis is, not something I would wish on anyone, but our kids are going to have an understanding of things that we just didn't have.
Yeah, that's right.
Or, and everyone has different things that they went through, but
I wonder, I mean, this is just me off the cuff coming up with a thing, but I wonder if in the future, if something, dramatic is happening in their adulthood, if they might not handle it a million times better than many of the adults are handling this right now.
Yeah. And that may very well be, right? Because they will have gone through it and understood it. And it may create a sense of resiliency that's
unwarranted.
Yeah.
We're invincible.
But like the ability to just roll with stuff, right? Because they've been forced to just roll with so many changes in their lives. This last year, essentially. So, but I think that schools are what they are, and I think it's a reflection of the broader situation in the world. But so I think I think sticking with COVID, but maybe moving away from schools. You had a clip that you wanted us to take a look at.
Yeah, let's try something new here. We'll try and share this video clip. This is from, I want to give credit where it's due. Connor O'Donovan is a Global Regina reporter, and he took this video and posted it on his Twitter. So I want to play a little bit of it. It's I just want to give a warning too. It comes across very racist. Like he says, well, no, he's racist. Like I don't want to say that he's, like
we don't need to pull punches. Just he is what he is.
He's racist. So, I will share this screen here, and I will. There we go. And we'll play it. Hopefully you can hear this.
I have a message for Scott. What's that public health minister's name? Shahab? Sharif? Shahor? I can't get these foreigners' names right. Anyway, are you shitting me? I mean, this is ridiculous. Okay, why don't you get the hell out of here? Who the hell needs you? Where are the news now?
Yeah, so I guess that's probably good enough. I mean, this is the freedom rally, right? These quote unquote freedom fighters, they want us to believe they know more than the experts. They want us to accept their racist rhetoric, their anti-media rhetoric, their anti-fact rhetoric, in fact, and they expect special treatment. And I don't know how many people rallied in Regina on Saturday, but only 2 of them got a fine.
Yeah.
And that is troubling to me.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where for those that are following masking guidelines and distancing guidelines, I think it is important that people still be allowed to attend public protests, right? Like that.
If you're following guidelines, then yes, absolutely.
Right. Like we talked about, when there was the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer, the guidelines were different then. But
right. Yeah. And people were doubling up on like the masks, even though it wasn't a mandate, and the distancing and yeah.
So I want to be clear that there are separate issues. there's the issues with the content of what they are saying, and we should condemn the content of what they're saying in the strongest possible terms, and it gets there's more to talk about with regards to the content. The actual presence of the rally itself, removing the content from it, I think there are ways of having a protest safely. I don't think any of us are surprised that a protest about doing things safely was not going to do things safely.
Right.
But to be clear, the presence of protest in and of itself is still something that's important, even when I disagree with the content of the protest. That said, rolling back to the content piece of it, the content is garbage, and we should still call out the content. Like just because we believe in someone's right to say things, doesn't mean we can't call them fucking idiots, right? Like,
exactly. This guy is still 100% full of shit.
Yes, 100% full of shit. I apologize for my ableist language there in my comment. But yeah, it's... and then you add in the racist elements, which again, I don't know how anyone was shocked by this.
No, that's right. This, just looking at the replies under Connor O'Donovan's tweet, right underneath, I see Kurt Phillips, who is part of the Anti-Racist Coalition of Canada, and Anti-Racism Canada Collective. Sorry. And this guy has been on his radar for a while already. He's this Ruddy Bruce. He's a known far right racist. So this is not surprising from that kind of person.
One of the things that I get that does frustrate me is, as all of this is happening, I'm still seeing the comments, and I think it may have been on maybe even one of your Facebook posts or a post of a mutual friend, but I think it was one of my own, actually. We still have sort of these quote unquote moderate conservatives pop up and say, oh, well, this is, don't paint all of us conservatives with this same brush. And
they make it hard not to.
They make it hard not to sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. And there was specifically talking about, there was the Beaverton article. I can't remember if this was more than a week old and if we talked about it on last week's episode, but the Beaverton article, about how conservatives blame their actions on Trudeau, some variant of that, and jokingly, and literally 2 days later, Erin O'Toole comes out and is saying, the reason MPs in my party are supporting right-wing conspiracy theories is because of Trudeau, right? Like, and like literally comes out 2 days later and is blaming, the reason my party has these, extremists in it who are promoting anti-science conspiracy theories is not our fault. And it's someone else's fault for it.
The party of personal responsibility, I guess.
And the original post that I was talking about there was this thing where, again, back to back, I think literally in a similar comment thread, there were conservatives talking about how we should force Justin Trudeau to take the vaccine before anyone else does. So because right, because it's dangerous, and if it's so safe, we should force Justin Trudeau to take this vaccine. And then in the same comment thread also, and Justin Trudeau is going to jump the queue and take the vaccine before everyone else. And anger over both of these things simultaneous, right? Like, we should force him to take it first to prove that it's safe, but also we're angry that he's going to jump the queue and get it first.
Yeah.
And whichever happens is what's going to make what they're going to be angry at, right?
That's right.
It's Schrodinger's outrage. I'll wait to find out what happens, and then I'll decide what I'm angry about.
Yeah.
And again, it was not all conservatives are like that. I'm like, this, and he's like, and said, no, this, like, maybe not all, but a wide swath. You look at the numbers in Alberta of people who have said they were going to refuse to take the vaccine, and you look at the leader of the Conservative Party supporting an MP spouting extreme conspiracy theories. And he's like, oh, well, the PPC only got 1% of the vote federally. I'm like, this isn't the PPC. Like, Aaron O'Toole isn't Maxime Bernier. Like, this is the federal Conservative Party. This is Jason Kenney. This is Scott Moe. And if you are actually opposed to this stuff, come out and say it. Yeah. Right? Like, these are mainstream voices within your movement. And you have these leaders trying to play both sides, support them without getting in trouble for supporting them. And it's inconsistent because, the left, it's like, oh, well, this political leader on the left once attended a university seminar in 1973 where the professor knew a guy who was roommates with a guy who once read a book by Karl Marx, right? And now you need to publicly condemn all of these things, or we're going to assume you're a communist, Barack Obama and Reverend Wright, right? Like, it's you attended his church 20 years ago, and you've openly and publicly condemned the things he said, but we're still going to hold you accountable for holding attending his church before he said them. And that's very consistent, right? Like, when it's a political leader from the left, there's this whole, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, that if they can tie them to someone who's controversial, that person from the left has to condemn that person or act or movement every single day. We see it with people within the Muslim community as well, right? Like, if someone is Muslim, there's this expectation that they condemn Islamic movements who are terrorists. Yeah, you daily.
See the same thing with the Women's March and feminism. The same thing with literally everything except for the right.
Yeah, and so if it's anything else, no matter how many degrees of separation is, there's an expectation that you condemn this stuff daily. Yeah. Whereas if it is on the right, you can literally be standing there. You can literally be retweeting the rhetoric that's being spoken, and somehow, oh, well, just because I retweeted something doesn't mean I support it.
Well, we saw that too with Andrew Scheer at the truckers who all went to Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And there was what was it, Laura Loomer or one of these far right, anti-Semite, obvious racist people, far right Nazis talking beside Andrew Scheer. And, and somehow he gets a pass. But it's, I don't know how much more we can point out the hypocrisy of these people, but also I can't stop doing it because it's so blatant and nobody seems to care.
No. And I don't know what I don't know what the solution to that is. I don't know how, I don't know what needs to be said to make people care about that. I think the people who are going to care do already, and others are willing to have, if there's enough plausible deniability, even the thinnest shred of plausible deniability. Yeah. No, it's weird.
Well,
I was playing this weird analogy, but I was playing some Madden football earlier,
Okay.
and my son was watching, and the other team gets a penalty in the game, and the crowd is booing, and I was like, why would they boo? Like, if and well, they're cheering, like, it's a video game, but like they're cheering for the other team. The other team got a penalty, so but like if the other team is doing something wrong, it's the referee's job to call it. Like, even if it's the team I'm cheering for, if the referee calls a penalty on them, it's because they got a penalty. And I'm like, yeah, the human brain doesn't work that way. No, if
I admire your moral
I'm guilty of that.
consistency.
If I'm at a Rider game, I see the other team is holding all the time, and the Riders are never holding.
Yeah. I admire your moral consistency, but that's not how this works.
And in a football game, it's a little less. There's a little less consequences.
Yeah, that's right.
Football is the place where it's probably okay to see penalties that the other team does, but not your own team. And it's unfortunate that it happens. It's unfortunate when it happens in the broader political scale as well. So,
yeah, especially when it's so obvious. Like,
yeah.
It's not like when you're in the stands watching a football game, you can argue that didn't look like holding to me. But when these guys are, openly courting the far right and these racists and people like. And I don't want to downplay the harm of the anti-mask movement either. Like, these guys, these COVID deniers they're contributing to the spread of misinformation and a disease that can actually kill people.
Yeah. I also, it's one of those things where I also end up wondering what that's like within the Sask Party caucus. Where you have people who are openly being attacked, and don't get me wrong, regardless of whether someone is a person of color, if they're in the Sask Party cabinet, I'm disappointed with a lot of their policies.
Yeah.
And the idea of feeling sympathy is there's an element there, but it's still one of those things where you're a member of the government. You are in many ways fighting for the very people. In theory, you're fighting for everyone in the province, but you're representing the very people who are at this protest to then be attacked, to then be facing racial slurs,
right,
and to not have your own party leader be willing to stand up and condemn it.
There was a statement from the who was it? Health Minister Jim Ryder made a statement in the legislature about the racism directed at Dr. Shahab. And so I guess somebody from the party has said something. We could potentially play a little bit of that if we wanted to, but also,
why don't we do that?
All right, let's, I will share this screen here and then play a little bit of this.
Say thank you to our healthcare professionals across the province for the work they do for all of us every day, but especially during the COVID pandemic. I also want to specifically thank a man who has helped navigate us through what is one of the most difficult times in our province's history. Dr. Saskatchewan Shahab, the Chief Medical Health Officer for the province of Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, I know how hard some days have been for him. But each day, with a cheery disposition, he continues to put in long hours to keep our citizens safe. Mr. Speaker, before his time in the ministry, Dr. Shahab worked as a regional medical health officer and served as a public health expert with multilateral health and donor agencies. Among his very impressive credentials are a Master's of Public Health from Johns Hopkins University, and he's a member of the Royal College of Physicians in the UK. As we approach the end of 2020, we're not out of the woods yet, Mr. Speaker, but fortunately vaccines are on the way. And we are confident that under the direction of Dr. Shahab, we will make it through. And for that, we thank him. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Shahab chose Saskatchewan as his home, and Saskatchewan chose Dr. Shahab as our doctor. I hope Santa leaves Dr. Shahab a new cardigan under the tree, and at some point that the new year is far less busy for him. I ask all members to join me in thanking Dr. Saqib Shahab for all the good work he has done and for all the good work he is about to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Right.
Did he actually condemn the racism?
No. No.
So-
Not at all.
so-
like it was good and coming out and saying, we support Dr. Shahab, but like that certainly has like that certainly doesn't condemn the people attacking him.
No, they need to come out and say that the words aimed at Dr. Shahab were not acceptable. They need to say that.
Yep. They won't. But
So
all right, maybe they will. Maybe
they
I've been
will.
wrong before.
So
I'm
last
happy.
week-
I'll be happy to be surprised on that one.
right, yeah. Last week we talked about Scott Moe. Maybe it was last week. Maybe it was the week before. I'm starting to lose track. But Scott Moe had a 61% approval rating still.
Yeah.
Do you think that this will affect his approval rating at all?
It might. Like I think you might see a spread to the Buffalo Party if Mo actually
Yeah.
stands up and implements
Yeah.
health policy, right? Like if Mo does his job, I guess. Like I don't know.
Yeah. If he does his job, he'll lose support from some of the people that are supporting him now, right?
Yeah. It's and we talked about this a few times. This thing where the conservative movement has been the voice of anger. Like it's a very angry form of populism. And the anger gets directed at things, and it's a useful tool.
Yeah.
But the people who thought they were holding the tool aren't.
Right.
Like
that's right.
This is what you need to figure out what you're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And there's no good solution, I don't think. I think when you reach the point that it's at now, I don't know if there is a solution that works, because we saw what happened. Like we saw what happened 30 years ago in Canada when they did try and distance themselves from it, because we had the 80s and 90s, early 90s, where there was this rising, trying to channel this rising Western alienation and anger and populism within the conservative movement. And when it went too far, the Conservative Party kind of distanced themselves from it because they didn't want to sacrifice things that were near and dear to their hearts. The Mulroney Conservatives didn't want to have to sacrifice their ties to big business. And we forget that the Reform Party, we kind of think of them now as these radical racists, but they also had this anger at Toronto, and everything Eastern Canada, and that included a lot of business interests, right? So there's this movement within the Conservative Party. The Mulroney Conservatives tried to channel, anger within Quebec, anger within Western Canada. They were tried to be the party of, you have this hatred of the Eastern elites.
Right.
And when it started to turn, they tried to distance themselves from that anger, and you created the Bloc Québécois and the Reform Party, and it fractured the conservative movement into a million pieces, or three.
Yeah.
You have the flip side in the U.S. where you created this Tea Party within the Republican Party, and tried to channel it. And when you saw it starting to get out of control and it starting to point in directions that you didn't really want it pointing in, rather than standing up to it, most Republicans just jumped on board and said, we'll ride this where it goes. And now you're starting to see how it turning back on them. Now with the Georgia race is going to be interesting there, and I know that's off topic for this podcast, but this thing where Trump supporters and Trump surrogates are actively encouraging people not to vote because the votes can't be trusted. So you've undermined faith in the voting process, and now all of a sudden all of these extreme conservatives are as anti-voting as they are anti-masking and anti-vaccine. And the conservatives are like, no, shit, be anti-vaccine, be anti-media, be anti-liberal, but don't be anti-voting. we still need you for that.
Yeah, it's like a reactionary nihilism has taken over the conservative movement, where like they don't actually believe in anything anymore. Like where you like in the 30s or like 30 years ago, you said in the 80s or 90s, they tried to distance themselves from this reactionary movement because they had things that they believed in. But I don't know if they have that right now. Like they don't seem to have anything except for that rage as a belief system.
Yeah, it's weird because like Harper was the least angry in a lot of ways, is the least rageful conservative I know. He was like the most cold and calculating politician Canada's had in forever. I think he wanted to try and channel it. And I think as long as Harper was the one sort of
he believed in power.
The ship. He believed in being in charge. I used to joke about how I am certain, absolutely certain, that Harper's son plays hockey because at some point Harper had a focus group that said you'd be more likable if your kid played hockey. And he was like, all right, son, you're playing hockey.
Yeah, that's right.
And you just got the feeling with Harper, every single thing was focus grouped and sort of plotted out. And then something would get under his skin, and then he would act, he'd lash out a little bit or act irrationally when something sort of got to him. But I think with him in charge, there was this ability to keep it in check. I don't think there's anyone who can keep it in check anymore.
Okay. Let me know if I'm way off base with this analogy. It's fun. I find it similar to, say, like the Middle East or Iran and Iraq and these issues with Saddam Hussein. The U.S. went in and they destroyed his power, and it created a power vacuum.
Yep.
And so the worst of the worst took control. Like you got ISIS had vast amounts of power for a very long time after that. And now here's the comparison. Stephen Harper was Saddam Hussein. He was the powerful one. He had an iron fist on his party. And after they elected Andrew Scheer as the leader or whatever, but it created a power vacuum. There's nobody there to take the reins. There is no control. There's no iron fist. And they need a strong man. They need an iron fist.
Yeah, I think
It's not a perfect analogy.
Yeah, no, no analogy is ever perfect. I think you're right about Harper believed in winning. I think that's accurate. And he kept he kept the voices of social conservatism in check. He kept trying to think of non-ableist language here, but he kept the crazies in check.
Right.
The extremists. That's the word. He kept the extremists in check.
Pardon the psychophobic language.
And I think, again, this is going a little bit. This is more Canada than Saskatchewan, but I think I've even talked about this on the podcast before. I call it the 905 effect. Right? You have the 905 is that ring around downtown Toronto. Yeah. Toronto has the area codes 416 in downtown and the 905 area code in that ring around. Right. So the 905 is like the suburbs, and they want to vote conservative there. If given the chance, it is a relatively conservative area. They want lower taxes. They want a lot of they're very pro business. That is their sort of natural voting inclination. Yeah. But they still want to be able to wake up in the morning and think of themselves as good people. And they know homophobia is bad, and they know racism is bad, and they know misogyny is bad. Yeah. And they're living in these $1 million homes and, earning 6-figure salaries, but they also have, 15-year-old non-binary kids with purple hair, and it's a stereotype, but like they have kids who are gay, and they have kids whose best friend is bisexual, and they themselves are not wanting to be seen as a bigot. Yep. They probably go golfing with someone who is an immigrant. They have lots of friends who are people of color. And they want to be able to not feel guilty around those important people in their lives. Yeah. So what Stephen Harper does is he gives them that plausible deniability we were talking about, or I was talking about earlier, and saying, no, this isn't the party of all of these things. This isn't the anti-abortion party. This isn't the anti-gay party. This isn't the racist party, the misogynist party, and all of these things. And Stephen Harper can go and talk to the forced birther MPs in his party and say, hey, we can't come out and say we're going to criminalize abortion because we won't be in power, and we need to stay in power in order to actually accomplish what you want. So we won't make a big announcement about it. But what we will do is slowly add regulations here, and we will fund this group who fights abortion in Africa there, and we will defund the Kairos charity over here, and we will instead fund some charity that probably has a combination of the words freedom, life, and whatever in their name. Right. And can do all of these sort of slow creeping things behind the scenes. And when, the 905 folks have their, university student kids come and say, hey, you support the racists, they can say, no, you're being reactionaries. No, they're not.
You just don't see it. It's business. It's business.
You have Harper derangement syndrome, or you have Trump derangement. Right. It's you just want to hate everything that we support, and you see you're jumping at shadows. And it's an issue with microaggressions on an individual level as well, right? It's, one of the problems when someone is in a marginalized community and faces microaggressions is any one thing that you point at seems like you're overreacting. Yeah. Right? It only seems... You only understand the weight of it in its aggregate.
Yeah.
And the Harpers of the world understand that you can accomplish a lot through microaggressions, right? This slow erosion of rights. Whereas you now have some Yahoo standing on the front step of the legislature making racist comments about, the province's chief medical officer.
Yeah. These are not microaggressions anymore.
They're not microaggressions anymore. So now it's not Scarborough or Mississauga, but it's Wascana View and White City and Emerald Park.
Yeah.
You have someone who is on conference calls with Vancouver and Toronto, is exposed to information, understands the world, again, wants to vote conservative because they want lower taxes and they want pipelines. But
they need that
really,
out.
They really don't care about a lot of the issues on the left, but they don't want their kids thinking of them as shitty people.
Yeah, they need plausible deniability.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have it, then they have to find a way to avoid that feeling or that cognitive dissonance or that dissonance within their families or whatever.
And I think that's where Mo is now going to be, where he will lose support, is because he has to pick who he loses.
Yeah.
Do you lose? Do you lose the guy screaming on the front step of the legislature who refuses to wear a mask and calls your medical officer racist names? In which case you lose a swath of your base to the Buffalo Party, or in Alberta, the Wexiters and all of this, right? We have these sort of movements to the right of the right now. Or do you risk losing the Suburbans, suburban vote that Trump lost, right?
Right.
That was a huge thing in the U.S. election, is that Trump lost the suburban noms.
Yep.
And then this sort of goes, this is maybe the light at the end of the tunnel on this topic as well, because we talked about how people aren't seeing the shit Mo is doing. But I maybe Mo not standing up to these folks does show people who he is. I don't think that's an immediate thing. I think that takes some time.
Yeah. Well, and we still have 4 years at least of Mo as our premier, right? So yeah,
we'll see. All right.
We've
had a very small number of topics that we've talked in depth about.
Yeah. But that's
there was a couple non COVID things here we talked about the CERB clawbacks in Saskatchewan. Sounds like there's a petition now dealing with the same issue that we talked about a few weeks ago. So I think that's positive. I think we'll see if that has an impact.
Yeah.
For actual non-COVID stories, there's the issues. Mo is quite angry at the Liberal 10-year plan.
Yes.
For carbon tax.
Yeah, he doesn't like carbon tax. That's for sure. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it wouldn't matter what he did, what the federal government did.
No.
Like, it could be a 1% carbon tax over, 25 years. And Mo would go, that's no good. It's too much. We can't pay that, so.
Yeah. And like $170 a ton is actual, like, substantial. Like, that actually would be great if it got to that point.
It would be nice. Yeah. Like, I'd like to see.
We'll see. I think Mo has more faith in Trudeau than I do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't see this actually coming through the way it's supposed to. Yeah.
It's just, I'm curious as to what folks like Mo and those who oppose carbon tax think we should do instead.
Nothing. That's the answer.
Yeah, because Mo says he acknowledges human activities contribute to climate change.
Right. He says that.
He says that. And conservatives, like not all, some just are outright climate deniers, climate change deniers. But like Mo claims that there's always says there's better ways of doing this. Like carbon pricing is the most libertarian solution to carbon.
Yeah, this is your free market.
This is the free market. So it's taking the cost of something and requiring people to pay for it.
Yeah.
Carbon is a form of pollution. Yep. If I showed up and started dumping garbage in your backyard, and the solution is I pay you. I get to choose how much garbage I dump in your backyard, but I have to pay you for doing it.
Right.
Like that is how the free market's supposed to be. Like one of the whole elements of libertarianism is that we have a protection of property rights. Property rights are supposed to be nigh sacrosanct.
Right.
And like my property is being destroyed by the carbon that goes out into the world. My health and life and all of that is too, but like my share of the planet, like my property, my share of Canada gets damaged by carbon pollution. So there should be compensation. Like I should be like the job of the state in the most libertarian of utopias is still the protection of private property. Right.
Right.
And my like, it's like the carbon pricing is taking externalities and pricing them. It's you are doing something that costs other people money, therefore you should have to pay for it.
Yeah. I don't know. One of the things that I recently got into a very large argument with my father about is climate change.
Yeah.
And the thing that they really like, the conservative mentality is very much on the mindset where China contributes such a large amount to climate change that we shouldn't have to change our lives at all because the thing that we're doing doesn't make any difference. So that's why when you say like, what alternatives do they think we should have? They don't think we should have any alternatives. They think that we are not responsible and cannot control what happens. Except that maybe that we should stop trading with China for somehow.
Okay, well let's do that then. Like,
yeah.
Like,
so I don't know how to respond to that, like, except to say, like, of course that's ridiculous. We should be doing something. Our contribution matters, especially when you add, like, we're part of an accord with other.
Per capita, we do pollute more than China.
That's true. Yeah.
Like per capita, we absolutely do. Yeah.
So there's that.
His statement is factually wrong. It's based on a faulty premise.
Yeah, that's right. Like, because it's just a matter of our population that we produce, overall a slightly lower, like a lesser number than they produce overall. But
sure.
But even still, like when we team up with hundreds of other countries and we all commit to a better plan and to a reduced output of CO2, then that's going to have an effect.
Yeah. And like that argument is wrong on so many levels. Right? Like, you couldn't get away with that in any other circumstance, right? It's like,
no.
The yes officer I know I was driving 130, but did you know someone else was speeding at 150, so you shouldn't ticket me?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, someone,
I
someone
know that
robs a liquor store and says, "Oh, okay, well, I may have robbed the liquor store, but did you know that the robbing of a liquor store is far less violent than war?" Like,
that's right. Yeah.
Like
For
robbing
example?
robbing a liquor store doesn't cost as much like human suffering as war does. Therefore, we shouldn't have laws about robbing liquor stores. Like no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. My dog shit in the park, but hundreds of other dogs shit in the park. Therefore, the shit, like, we all have to take responsibility for our own shit.
Yeah. And again, the more left-wing solution to the carbon issue is putting in place laws where you have to clean up your own dog's shit. If your dog shits in the park, you have to clean up that shit.
Yeah.
Or you're fined for not cleaning up that shit. And it's the carbon pricing is, hey, you can go to the dog park, and if you don't clean up your dog's shit, you just pay $10 a poop and someone else will clean up the dog's shit for you.
Yeah.
That's carbon pricing. And, you make the price per shit high enough, less people are going to not clean up the poop. And you have money to use towards cleaning up the poop.
Yeah.
And it can stimulate the economy because now you have a poop picker upper. And it's not right. And that's what the carbon pricing is designed to around being revenue neutral. So it's you take the funds that are earned from those who are not picking up their dog shit.
Yep.
You channel that into into things that are cleaning up the park. And now you have a much prettier park because A, you reduce the amount of shit that's not getting picked up. And B, you have more money that's being spent on making the park nicer overall. And it's the same thing with carbon pricing. It's you put a price on carbon, you reduce the amount of carbon consumption. It's not like it'll go to zero, but it incentivizes finding lower carbon solutions to things.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And you then have that extra resource that can be spent on technology like that helps deal with the climate crisis, right? Yeah. It's a win-win. And again, this could have been the right wing's the right wing's crowning jewel. This could have been the political right in North America going, we did it. We solved the climate crisis. We came up with a economically viable solution to a problem using staying true to our own beliefs.
Right.
Look, right-wing ideology can actually solve a problem.
But instead,
they had a commitment to the problem not getting solved. Again, this is one of those ones that breaks my brain.
Yeah.
This is one of those ones I'm like, centrism no longer has meaning because the right no longer believe in what they believe in. Like there isn't this, we can come up with left-wing solutions and right-wing solutions, and there's value in both, because anytime the right wing is effective, they decide to sabotage their own ideas. Yeah. Even when the left adopts them. Like you saw the same thing with healthcare in the US, right? Like
That's right.
Obamacare is about as right-wing a solution to healthcare as you can possibly have other than not solving the problem.
Yeah. But they would just rather not solve the problem. They just would rather leave it.
So there is no, sigh. Sorry. This is one of those ones where so much of what the right does frustrates me on a moral and ethical and emotional level. This one just frustrates me on a logical level, right? And even on a strategic or tactical or political level. It's just like, you guys, this could have been your win. And I guess they don't need wins. They're winning elections anyways, at least in Western Canada. So
because it's a team sport, it's not about anything.
It's not about it's not about actually scoring touchdowns. It's about getting the fans to cheer the loudest.
Yes, that's right.
And I guess they're the 61% of the population of Saskatchewan are going to vote for Mo the quarterback or cheer for Mo the quarterback even when he's throwing interceptions and fumbling the ball every second play.
Yep.
And
that doesn't sound that sounds actually a lot like Saskatchewan. We love our shitty quarterbacks.
Yeah. We could win. Like you could actually try winning games.
Yeah, you could try that, but why, right? It's better just to be the loudest cheerers.
Yeah, I guess. That was the marketing strategy that turned the franchise around, right? So maybe politicians are paying attention and just learned from them.
Yeah.
I'd still rather them win.
Reactionary nihilism for the win.
Anyway,
so I think that's about as good a place to end it.
Yeah.
I don't have any solutions.
Getting a little punch drunk this week, I think.
I went for breakfast a couple weeks ago with a buddy of mine, and he comes to me because he says, "You seem like a person who's, follow a lot of stuff. You got you got a lot of good ideas. You're a good critical thinker." I'm not patting myself on the back. He actually said these things. So where do I find hope in the world? And I looked at him and I just said, "Dude, there is none. I don't know what to tell you." We're fucked. I don't know what to say.
I'm hopeful despite everything. I'm the more hopeful of the two of us, maybe. I don't know. I think there's still hope. I think there is.
I just find joy in my day-to-day life, and I try to make the world a better place. I don't know about hope, but
waxing philosophical. Human existence has been an ever-expanding acknowledgement of those who we can enter into mutual altruism with. And we humans have throughout our existence, and this is both like cold and calculated and rational, but also fills me with hope. Humans throughout our existence have started caring about other people as soon as it became in our self-interest to do so. Humans as a species have gotten very good at caring about anyone who benefits us. And the world right now is turning into a world where I am positively impacted by the well-being of everyone else on this planet. Yep. We are so interconnected. And I think, things like COVID sort of help point this out. And I think it's a race to see if our morality and our ethical frameworks catch up with the needs that we have. But I have faith in the enlightened self-interest of humanity to eventually catch up with the realities of the world we live in. And enlightened self-interest will eventually pay off in such a way that we will start caring about each other more and caring about our own continued existence enough to deal with things like climate and wearing masks and vaccinating and all of these things, because the price of not doing so will eventually kick us in the you-know-where. And it's just a matter of how big a price we have to pay before it does that. Right.
I hope you're right. I hope that's a thing that happens.
I have faith in human selfishness. My faith in human selfishness gives me hope.
Okay. All right. I can see where you're coming from there.
So, like I said, it's been a week. It has been a very, very rough week. So that's about as positive as I can get right now. So
sounds good.
Well, thank you once again for letting me, spout nonsense for an hour.
This, even though we touched on fewer topics, we went a little bit more in depth on them. We tried out something new with the clips. It was a great week, I think.
All right. So I'm looking forward to seeing where we take things next week.
All right. So If you want to listen to this, anchor.fm/from many peoples. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at skpoliticspod. Facebook is facebook.com/from many peoples strength pod. And our email frommanypeoples@gmail.com. So that's where you can get in touch with us.
Please do.
Please do. Thank you, David, for joining me tonight.
You're very well. Thank you, Cory. Take care.